Hello, everybody, and welcome. As many of you know, I have been a Ranger main since playtest 2. I have well over 100 hours simply on Ranger and Darker, and I want to take a little time to talk about the conversation around the Ranger meta, whether or not longbow, which has been our best ranged weapon for a very long time, is likely to be replaced by crossbows after the recent buff. I want to explore that with you guys and share my thoughts. It's a pretty complex topic, but it really comes down to the comp you're running and who you're going to be fighting. I'm going to pause here for a second as we get pushed by this barb. Okay, the barb is dead. So longbow, as you know, has been pretty much the best ranged weapon available to Ranger for a while. It's got a lot of advantages. A third of our talents are kind of bow specific, and our best traits are also focused around the bow. There are several right now that affect crossbows, but let's really have a conversation about the two playstyles. First of all, let's talk about PvE, where I think, looking at it in the most favorable light, the crossbow is a push, or is slightly inferior to either of the two good bows, being the recurve and the longbow. There's a couple different reasons for this. They're both more forgiving. When using triple shot, they essentially have a higher burst against consistent targets. And that's something that we've kind of relied on. Now, with the recent changes to crossbows, what have they done? They've added armor pen. They have increased the travel time of bolts, so they're
What's that aura he has around him?
slightly easier
Oh.
to land. They're harder to dodge, but they're still easier than an accelerated arrow to dodge from an enemy perspective. So, in a PvE scenario, and this may be my bias of having used it for literally hundreds of hours, the longbow is just better at PvE. But with the changes to crossbow, I wanted to take it into the caves. I ran about a dozen or so goblin caves over the course of an afternoon. Really just getting a feel for it in the context of PvE and in the context of a lot of 1v1 fights. Now, something that we need to talk about right away is the crossbow is a better weapon against very thick targets. So when we're talking about the cleric, when we're talking about the fighter, this is a superior weapon if you can hit your shots. It's going to do more burst on them. It's going to put them under a lot more pressure, and they're going to be put to a decision about how to proceed a lot faster than the recurve or the longbow. And that's one thing. On the other hand, outside of the 1v1 context, I, as a ranger in a 3-man team or even as a duo, I'm generally fighting back to front. Once again, I have a bias here where I am focusing on softer targets, other DPS, other rangers, other wizards, warlocks, etc. And so, that alpha, unless it's a one-shot, I think the longbow is still going to outperform in that role. Now, maybe our role is going to change so that we're going to be focusing front to back and fighting the enemy front line with higher priority than in the past. But I don't know. I will tell you that, the Goblin Caves is an incredibly friendly module for both clerics and warriors. Warriors can come in running the Weapons Master perk, and they can pretty much use anything they find. And the clerics also do really well in here with their damage mitigation, their essential immunity to the goblin poison, and their sustain here. So also, you're generally only fighting and able to judge the value of a weapon against folks who are pretty juiced. And you run into them, you probably get one, maybe two of those per lobby, if you get any at all. The kind of guys who are coming in here juiced into Goblin Caves are primarily rogues running blue or epic weapons with kind of middling armor. And that scenario against the ranger is unchanged. Like there's no clear advantage for crossbow or bow, except to say that the bow is more forgiving. If you miss the shots, you're going to be able to fire again much faster. In these videos that I'm showing here back to back, I am running the reload speed perk. I am running True Shot and um, Field Rations for the sustain. I think Field Rations is a no-brainer when you're solo. And the results are pretty clear. I'm able to succeed here because of my superior map knowledge and my comfort with the class. And the spear is just amazing on Ranger, regardless. I was not wowed across a dozen games or so by the superiority of the crossbow. As a matter of fact, many times I found I was wishing for a longbow. So I want to throw this out here. Perhaps, we're going to be living in a world when we're 3 stacked on the Ranger where we are carrying a longbow for long range engagements and then a crossbow for the particular scenarios where we want to, engage their front line with priority. But I don't know. I mean, obviously the talent system isn't going to support, adding value to both weapon types. So if that's the case, I think we're going to go winless with no crossbow talents and end up using all of our traditional longbow talents and primarily use the longbow for PvE and our current role of back to front DPS priority. I am interested in what the rest of the Ranger community thinks about this. I know I have not spent as much time in the past, obviously playing with crossbows as compared to the longbow. I think the spear is too valuable to give up as a melee weapon for both PvP and PvE. But once again, I'm not certain to what degree my bias is really, causing me to overlook particular value with the crossbow. I think that our inventory management issues as the Ranger and just the overall cost of operating a Ranger, and you guys know, running a Ranger is expensive. You are constantly, even on successful extracts, you are resupplying traps, you are resupplying ammunition, and the availability of crossbows is much, much lower than the availability of other bow alternatives, which means that you're going to have to be buying off the marketplace. You're going to have to be buying off vendors, gambling off the Goblin Merchant, and they've installed so many. Iron Mist has installed so many kind of cash sinks into the Ranger at this point. I'm not sure how viable it's going to be able to run both in your gear sets with any consistency. Add to that fact that with the crossbow, you need to simply be more accurate. You need to land more hits. And so against our high availability, our high movement speed targets like the Rogue and the Wizard, it's going to be simply less forgiving in those 1-on-1 engagements. When you miss your opening shot, you then have to fall back immediately into a defensive posture with your melee weapon to be able to come out on top in that scenario. The playstyle that I'm engaged with the Ranger is really a medium to long range engagement, soften up the targets, finish them off if necessary with a melee weapon. I don't want to be pushed. I would prefer somebody in front of me, like a fighter, creating the space that I need to operate to prioritize, the right targets. And I certainly don't feel like my accuracy with the crossbow or with the windlass is high enough to kind of close the gap in what I'm familiar with in terms of the longbow. So, like I said, I'm really interested in the discussion. If you have any points of view about the crazy alpha potential of the epic winless. I'm interested in seeing some more of that. But right now, having put about a day into it and probably invested 200 or 300 gold worth of crossbows into maps fighting various matchups, I still want the longbow. So, like I said, I'm interested in everybody's feedback and a robust discussion around this. Please, let's start that conversation in the comments below. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you guys today in this conversation. There's a couple more games here where I'm showcasing, the crossbow as an alternative to longbow. And enjoy and good luck. Am I making you laugh over there?